Ya llegué.
Ok, perfecto. Ya les expliqué tantito, o sea, de qué hicimos con Campi y que ya ahorita a las 10 empezamos.
Va, perfecto. Luis sigue grabando, pero dice Mario que sí llega a la sesión.
¿Mandé?
Que Luis sigue grabando, pero dice Mario que sí llega a la sesión y que si no, podemos hacer las preguntas o tú o yo. ¿Qué preguntas tiene él? Pero pues sí.
Ok, a ver. Dame.
Y o sea, Sebas ya sabe que viene más o menos. Sí, ¿no?
Creo que no la avisé. Es que me dijo Mario que la avisé neta de que 2 segundos antes. A ver, déjalo digo.
Pues ya, ¿no?
Sí, la voy a poner como, oye, Sebas, ¿qué onda? Viene Hello, justices and agents. I believe we're just waiting for one more justice to join to have the quorum that we had yesterday, that they were changing their name. Our repertoire is going to be a bit late for this session, so if you could begin turning on your cameras, that would be great. Well, as both agencies have been informed, and justices, we are now informing you, the chair has decided to call on Mahmoud Mustafa Usaif Al-Warfali to come and testify before this court. So if anyone has any questions about how this is going to work, we'll just briefly explain. To begin, the chair will be asking a few questions and will intervene whenever they have another question to ask. Following that, the agency of the prosecution will have an opportunity to ask Mr. Mustafa any question they please and see relevant to their case. Following the prosecution's participation, we will proceed with the same process for the defending agency. And finally, justices will have the same opportunity to ask. Any questions about how this is going to work? Seeing none, I'm going to yield the floor to your president to begin with the roll call before proceeding.
Thank you, Vice President. Justices and agents, we will begin with the roll call. Agent Barrera.
Present.
Thank you. Agent Berlanga.
Present.
Agent Steer. Agent Steer. She's present. Justice Carvajal.
Present.
Justice Prost.
Present.
Agent Valladares.
Present.
And Justice Akane.
Present.
Everyone else will be marked absent. Thank you. I declare that we have quorum, and with that, I declare this second session of the ICC open. I yield the word to your Vice President to continue with the presentation of Mr. Al-Warfali.
Thank you, President. So, agents and justices, as you have been informed, we're now in the presence of Mahmoud Mustafa Usaif Al-Warfali, the defendant of Case A. So we will begin with, seeing as our repertoire is still going to take a few minutes, we will begin with the questions of the prosecuting agency. So Agent Valladares, you may ask the questions to Mahmoud Mustafa Usaif Al-Warfali. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. A point of personal privilege.
Established.
Would like to ask, is it necessary to open a point of information to the questions, or it's free?
No, seeing as we are now in seeing as a witness is now testifying and the prosecution has the word, you do not need to open a point of information. Ask the question and then I will give the word to the witness.
Thank you. First of all, Mr. Al-Warfali, thank you for being here. So my first question will be, what specifically influenced you in order to stay into the Al-Qaeda brigade and into commit some of the allegedly actions that you are accused for?
Well, first of all, good morning. What inspires me? Well, as you know, to stay where I was staying that moment, it was the national movement that inspires me to change my nation, to change Libya. And why I do what I do, that it's like your second question inside your first question. It's that I need to follow orders. I mean, have you ever been in a war before, attorney? You need to follow the orders because some cases you need more bravery to go back than to go to the front.
So you were ordered to commit some kind of things?
That's correct.
Okay. And one question. Did the first commandant of the brigade threatened you to cause any physical or any physical hurt to you if you didn't obey the instructions they gave you?
Military rules are very peculiar. They didn't told you what punishment you can affront if you don't do the specific things they ask you. However, one can imagine when you are surrounded with folks with physical and power and guns, what is going to happen to you if you don't follow orders.
Did you took any point of personal inquiry?
That's an order.
Initiative.
Initiative.
Sorry. May reestablish. So did you took any initiative in this campaign? Did you did something by your count?
I beg your pardon. Initiative in I was following orders, but you refer to make something like, I don't know, creating plans or giving orders myself?
No, what the attorney wants to ask is if you, nevertheless, and no matter of the instruction they gave you, did you took any initiative or did you did something more than the instructions?
I was ordered to do something, I do something. I do that specific thing, no more, no less.
Okay. Thank you. That will be all my questions.
Okay. Thank you, Agent Valladares, and thank you, Mr. Mustafa, for the questions. We will now proceed with the questions of the Agency of Defense. So one of the three agents, you may ask your question. Your questions, plural, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So for the first question that I would like to begin with is, who commanded that you perform these alleged acts? Who was in charge of commanding that you perform said crimes?
The actions that I made were ordered from Khalifa Haftar itself. Hello.
Agents, if you want to continue with your questions, I do not have to yield the floor. This is solely between the agency and the witness.
So by saying that you were commanded by Khalifa Haftar, you are admitting that you were ordered by some commander to perform such alleged act?
Beg your pardon, Agent. Can you repeat?
Yeah, sorry. So by saying that you were commanded by Khalifa Haftar to commit these acts, you were saying that there was a supervision from someone else to perform these acts, and it wasn't just your mere point of view to perform these alleged crimes, right?
Not in that specific way, but following that idea.
Sorry, Agent Valladares, did you object to that?
Thank you.
So you're not gonna object, okay. Agency of the Defense, you may continue.
Mr. Al-Wafali, did you ever feel pressured, forced, or even threatened to perform these actions that you allegedly performed by your commanders?
Not some point. I was always feeling precious about it because it's war and it's something you have to do, and consequences, or even don't do it right, can be disastrous for someone like me.
Have you been suffering from any mental illnesses? And if so, for how long has this been going on for?
I have no mental illness. I am perfectly in perfect mental health, and everything I do was ordered for Khalifa Kaftar, as I mentioned before.
However, Mr. Al-Wafali, official court documents show that you were in presence of a psychologist, and you were inside a psychiatric hospital a few weeks ago. How do you explain that if you allegedly don't have any mental illnesses?
I don't know how to explain it. I just know I don't have any mental illness. I'm not crazy, is what you're referring.
Mr. Mustafa, were you aware of the moral repercussions and consequences that your actions were having and that could have in the future for your country and the captives and the alleged crimes that you may have committed?
As I mentioned, I was following orders. Every action I do, it was to follow orders to accomplish the goal of someone else, specifically Khalifa Haftar. Sorry.
Mr. Al-Wafali, would you say that you have Libya's best interest at heart in all your actions?
In that moment, Khalifa Haftar and some other leaders think that. So if they think that, me as a soldier, I was unable to think other thing than that.
Mr. Mahmoud, would you describe yourself as a religious man who follows strictly the Islam religion? And if being so, will you consider yourself as a strict follower of the Sharia law? Being so, this is described as the path of God and the goodwill of it. This being said, this means that your actions may be described being done in order to satisfy God acts and God pleasures. So would you say that you are a religious person and indeed follow the Sharia law?
I am not discussing my personal spiritual beliefs in this trial, and that agent is something that, as far as I know, it's defended in the United Nations Charter. So I am not discussing that topic.
Mr. Al-Wafali, would you care to share a little bit about your experience in the psychiatric ward and how you were treated and what exactly makes you think that you are mentally stable?
I am mentally stable because I just know I'm mentally stable. If I wasn't mentally stable, I will be the first one who doesn't know that I am mentally stable. I mean, I don't want to share that because it's my personal medical information, and therefore I'm not sharing that. But I just know, I as mentioned before, agent, I am not crazy. If just that's what you're referring again.
Have you ever been told by a professional that you are in fact mentally stable? The agency would like to remind Mr. Al-Wafali that it is not insinuating that Mr. Al-Wafali is crazy or mentally insane in some way, but rather it suffers from a condition that is perfectly understood by society and is not seen as something that could make him be negative.
So far, non-psychologist or psychiatrist, as I have memory, have said something like that to me.
Mr. Al-Wafar, how would you describe your childhood growing up in Libya? You were born between the dictatorship of Mr. Gaddafi. Would you describe yourself growing up in a violent environment in a way? Or how was the environment in your household and in your community?
It was as you can expect in some place like Libya in the time you specified. Take your own conclusions.
Agents and Mr. Mustafa, sorry to interrupt. Agency of Defense, we have time for 2 more of your questions.
Seeing as Mr. Haftar was the one who turned you in to the ICC and was the one who actually arrested you in the first place, do you feel betrayed and taken advantage of by your commanders, as in they did so in an attempt to save their own skin and to be able to remain innocent while you took the blame for all the actions that carried out in Libya?
As I mentioned before, Khalifa Haftar ordered all things, or he knows everything he was doing. He used me and other fellow soldiers in order to commit all those things. And so now I am here and he's not. So I can say that your affirmation is kind of correct.
And Mr. Wolfali, are you stating or declaring that you never received any mental help at any point, including any medicine that was prescribed to you as declared on the documents?
I will say that no, in this moment, or at least not that I have knowledge of.
Thank you, Agency of the Defense. Your time for questions has now ended. We will now proceed with any questions the justices may have. Justices, if you have questions, please raise your Zoom hand and I will call on you to participate. Justice Akane, please state your question.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, Mr. Mustaf, you mentioned the Libyan cause was some sort of inspiring for you. Do you consider that all of the murders you are accused of were necessary to further this cause?
In war, it's not moral. War doesn't have principles. War, it's war. So when Khalifa Haftar told me to do those things, it was the correct thing at that moment, to the movement, to the country, to the cause.
Thank you, Justice Akande, for your question. Any other questions from the justices? Seeing none, the application of Mahmoud Mustafa Saif Al-Rafali has now concluded. Mr. Mustafa, thank you so much for coming before the court today. Agents and justices, thank you for your questions.
Thank you.
Well, agents and justices, we know that this witness was outside of the schedule that we had provided. However, this was very last minute, the organization of his testifying. So we will now proceed with the schedule as was planned. Taking that into consideration, we will now proceed with the hearing of the prosecution. This is the moment where the prosecution will present their evidence, arguments, and then we will give time for questions to this same agency. I would also like to take this opportunity to remind you all that, to let you all know, that the prosecuting agency now has one more agent. They were unable to attend yesterday's session, but they're now here. So, agency of the prosecution, you have the floor. You also have the ability to share screen. And also, before we begin, the chair just wants to make a quick announcement. This is the International Criminal Court, and the trials that we have here are for crimes against humanity and for heinous crimes. So the evidence that may be presented in these trials can be extremely graphic. So this is kind of a trigger warning. These evidences likely include murder being on film and extremely graphic images, dialogue, and just war in all of its capacities. So again, trigger warning for these evidences.
Chair, point of personal privilege.
Establish.
May the prosecutors have 1 minute or two to coordinate the evidences?
Yes, it is currently 10:22. We will begin the prosecution hearing at 10:25.
Okay, thank you. So the prosecutors will take 2 minutes to discuss a little bit of the evidence. Okay, thank you. The agent's going to turn off a little bit the camera and will return in 1 minute.
Also, just regarding the trigger warning that we just gave, again, these are extremely graphic images, and if some of you prefer not to watch the full videos, the chair completely understands and hopes it doesn't impede anyone's ability to pass judgment.
Sorry for the delay. One minute. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Agency ready?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Just as an agent, please turn on your cameras so we can begin with prosecution hearing.
Thank you, Chair. Now I'm gonna share the screen.
Oh, one quick note, unless it is absolutely crucial to the video's understanding, the chair would like to ask if the sound can be turned off for the videos.
Yeah. Okay, just a minute. Okay, so now I'm gonna share a screen to present the first video. Okay. We'd like to know if the chair is actually If the video is gonna show, can you all control sheet?
See the screen, yes.
Yeah. Well, this is an article that talks about the video of the capture and the executions that was first talked about. So we all can see here, there's the pic. The video is not gonna show because it is very graphic, because in this case, we can see here to the accused that it's Mahmoud Mustafa with the paper in his hands. And he is already giving the orders to the people here to being executed. So there is, using the picture, we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 persons being in the floor without shoes, with a bag or a kind of cloth in their heads so they can see, and their hands are tied. This is a war crime because in the state of Rome says that even though in a conflict, in a belly conflict happening inside a country, in this case Libya, there is a certain trait that you cannot give to the civilians and you cannot give to the people, and this is what they are doing in the court, and even in the witness moment. The accused Mahmoud Mustafa did never deny anything. He always was repeating, they gave me orders, I follow it. But in the first place said that what inspires me to do is the nation, the change that we have to do in the nation. So that's basically what we are seeing here. The above image is a screenshot for a video piece, for a video posted in July 24, 2017, showing the apparent summary execution by LNA fighters of 20 prisoners, whom the commander believed to ICC suspect Mahmoud al-Rafali, which we can see clearly here, wearing cap, accused of terrorism. The original video can be found here. So the agent would like to not show the video because it's very graphic, and it will be triggering for some of the justices. So this is the first proof.
The chair understands. Okay.
So so this is the first proof. May the agent continue with the others, or it's going to wait just in the first one?
No. The hearing, the format of the hearing is completely up to the agency at hand. So you may proceed with the evidences, and we are saving all questions for the end. So justices, if you have any questions, please write them down as we go, and you will have time to ask them once the hearing has concluded. So you may proceed between evidences without any indication from the chair.
So the justice has any questions?
The questions will be at the end. So
Okay.
the evidences, and we will.
Okay. Thank you. So this is the first proof, which we can see here, actually. Actually, YouTube is done even letting me play the video because of the graphic of those.
If you want, agent, we might be able to play the video for you at the end.
So may the agent play the video?
Yeah, so if the software doesn't allow you to do so, finish the hearing, and when you're done, send us a link and we'll play it for you.
Okay. So the other video that is the second proof that we are trying to show is this. Okay, first I'm going to explain the context of the video. That it's basically that. One moment. Here we can see a video showing an execution of 10 people outside the barrel of Radwan in Benghazi. The killings were ordered by al-Rafali and are referred as the 8th incident. So this is other video of executions. And I think we're going to play it. As we can see here now, there is the same pattern of the last video. We're going to pause here to discuss it. There is the same pattern of the execution. The people is blinded with clothes in their heads. Their hands are tied, and they are in the floor in a position where they are vulnerable. And they are here. We can hear how they dict the sentence and the reason why they are already being murdered or executed. And we can see the graphic images here. And once again, Mahmoud Mustafa. This time without a cap in the head. The rest of the video is protest and stuff about what happened in the beginning because of the discontent of the people, which is totally understandable. So this is the second proof. And not only, I would like to make a highlight about the really degrading treat that they are giving to the war prisoners, and what is the same pattern of the same proof. And also that in this video, we can see Mahmoud Mustafa too. There. Just one moment. There. But this time without a cap in the head. This is, again, an execution of 10 people in Benghazi. And it's very graphic. So that's the proof number 2. Let me see if here it is. No, this is wherever it is. No.
Again,
The link
those
videos.
videos. Yeah, you may send it to us through the
Yep.
chat and we'll play them later.
Yep. The link videos is going to be sent because of the software we can. This wasn't passed because of the software and because of the graphic of the videos. It is not all the way to see. But there's another video where we can see another execution of 3 people standing in front of a floor. And there is, again, Mahmoud Mustafa. In the 3 evidences shown here, not only there are people that allegedly were ordered to be executed by the accused Mahmoud Mustafa, but also Mahmoud Mustafa is present during the executions. And he's the one who demands and orders the executions. There is something really important in here. In the witnesses moment, this agent asked about if in any moment the accused Mahmoud Mustafa have any initiative and what he was ordered to do, because it may be the first argument of the defense will be like, oh, he was the accomplish of the orders that Khalifa Haftar were given to him. But we can see here that if the orders were only execute them by sins, we can see that there is a passional stuff there, because he did not only executed them, but instead of that, once that they were already dead, he is still is shooting to their bodies, to their dead bodies. And that's totally a proof that he was acting not only under others, but also because he was convinced that what he was doing was good. He was convinced that what he was doing was something that he was inspired of, and he was good with doing it.
Objection? Competence.
Yes, agent, that is in order. What objection did you say?
Competence. The agent cannot establish a judgment on whether or not Mr. Al-Wafali is passionate about what he's doing, and whether or not he knows that the people are dead already and he's merely shooting out of passion. That is a unsupported claim.
Thank you, Agent Berlanga, for the objection. Just as an agent, seeing as is the first objection, we would just like to briefly explain. When the hearing is taking place and the opposing agency makes an objection, it is a justice's responsibility to vote if the objection passes or not. Should you vote yes, it does pass. The argument presented by the prosecuting agency will be dismissed and should not be taken into consideration in the verdict. If the objection does not pass, we will continue the hearing. So, justices, please vote if the objection on the grounds of competence is accepted or rejected. Please use your yes, no reactions as we did yesterday in the pre-trial. So the objection did not pass. Thank you, Agent Berlanga, for the participation. Agent Valladares, you may continue with the hearing.
Thank you. So going back to the point, the principal point is that he did not only accomplish with the work with the order to execute them, but he was also doing more than that, because it was degrading to the body, degrading to the corpses, to ones that they are already dead, because we can see clearly that the shots are in the head at this point.
Agent Valladares, sorry to interrupt. We understand the argument is crucial, but we've seen the video. If the agent could not repeat it, could refrain from repeating it, the chair would greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. So that was the first argument and the principal argument of that video, because it's not only the crime, but it's also that he was fully aware of what he was doing and did more of that. So, going to show the other video. Here we can see to the accused Mahmoud Mustafa, and the same pattern. Our prisoner is standing in the floor with the hands behind his head, and he is giving a kind of a speech with a gun in his hand. It's the direct accused, Mahmoud Mustafa.
Thank you, Agent. I think we can pause the video there. Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
The agent didn't wanted to show the moment of the execution, but just in images we can see that it was clearly a murder of one people in the video, and it was not only by jointly with another person. He was the one who murdered to this man, and we could clearly see it. No, that's it. And now, Kurt, that's the principal evidences, and would like to comment into that the evidences shown here, not once again, and it's repetitive, but it's very important to understand to all the court that it's not only what he was ordered to do, it's not only what he was ordering to do to other people, but he was the one who already committed those crimes with his hand, and he pulled the trigger in 3 and where we in the probes could see in 2 occasions, he was the one who pulled the trigger. So that will be all the proofs for the moment. Thank you, Chair.
So, Agent Valladares, your hearing has concluded. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. We will proceed to hear any questions the justices may have. Justices, we recommend you make at least one question per justice. And if you want to participate, please raise your Zoom hand. All questions here will be directed to the prosecution. Justice Kimberly Prost, please ask your question.
Thanks. As we know, the country Libya is under the religion Islam. The 95% of his citizens are under Islam. So is there any possibility that this is made? Well, also, so many delictive groups are under this religion, are under this goddess that they excuse that they these murders as their god. So there's any possibility that Mahmoud is under a religion, and this is some of the reason that why he's killing people.
Point of personal privilege.
Established.
The agent would like to rephrase the question in order to get sure that is what he was asked for. So,
could you repeat the question for Agent Valladares?
Yeah. Basically, the question is if there's any possibility that he make these acts for just a religion, like is Islam.
Yeah. Well, the Rome Statute does not talk about religious beliefs when it talks about crimes, because no matter the religious belief of any person, there is something about the law that it's not up to be violated, and the Roman Statute is very clear when it says that the war crimes, which in this case is where the accused is accused for, have no any kind of justification, even though if the accused Mahmoud Mustafa would say, oh, I was doing this for my religion, for my beliefs, there must be a punishment from the International Criminal Court, because he was already violating the human dignity, violating the human rights, and in conclusion, no, there is no any part of the Rome Statute who said that a person is free of guilty because of their religious beliefs when a crime is committed, and more with a crime like this, that it's murder and degrading trait.
Thank you, Justice Kimberly Prost, for your question, and Agent Valladares. Justices, if you have any questions, please raise your Zoom hand. Oh, sorry. Yes, Justice Akane, please ask your question.
Do you believe that the videos showcase a mental element mentioned previously?
Well, I think this question will be answered like in 2 parts. The first part and the ethical one will be that I and me as an agent, as an attorney, it's not a matter of what I do believe or not, because I try to be totally personal in trying to follow all the Rome Statute. So I think that it's not important if I believe or not. But answering the question, no, I think that there is no any kind of relation with the mental condition of the accused, which has already been said and even thought by himself, that there is no any kind of mental situation here, because he said that he was not mental ill, and there are no any kind of document who said or who tried to prove that. So I think that no, there is no like a kind of link between what we saw and the mental situation with the accused.
Thank you, Justice Gandhi, for your question. Justice Kimberly Prost.
So what are you basically saying is that any people that commits a murder, it's actually in good mental health, or well, in my opinion, no one that commits a murder is in mental health. So are you saying that he is in mental health even he's committing murders and killing people?
Thank you. No, what this attorney is actually saying is that in this specific case, there is no reasonable grounds to believe that the accused is mentally ill, which in case, just imagining, because there is no proof of it, and the accused himself said that he was not mentally ill. But just in case, trying to imagine that the accused was already mentally ill, anyways, there is no way to the accused for being exonerated for these crimes, because the International Criminal Court does not judge one murder, judge a criminal act when this criminal act trespasses the international barrier, and it is affecting more than just one sector. And we can see in the principal argument from the ICC, there are the reasonable grounds to believe that he was in a bellic conflict, not international bellic conflict, and what he was doing inside the country was totally human degrading, and that's why this attorney is actually trying to discard the part of the mental illness, because there are no, in this specific case, there are no reasonable grounds to believe that.
Thank you, Justice, for your question. Justice Chang Ho.
Thank you. So I have a question for the agents. So regarding what the previous justice asked, would you say that the court should only refer to the facts and ignore Article 31?
Sorry, point of personal privilege?
Established.
Could the Justice Carvajal explain about the Article 31 and its importance and the question?
Actually, the chair can take care of that. So just a brief explanation. Let me see if I have this correctly. 1 second. The Article 31, according to the Rome Statute that I have right here, is, I'm pretty sure it's the mental element. So, no. Article 31 is grounds for excluding criminal responsibility, so it just states on which grounds the International Criminal Court can, exclude criminal responsibility for the defendant. So, with that in mind, agent, please proceed to answer the question.
Yes, just to add up from that, Article 31 is the one that considers the mental element and the authorities above Mr. Al-Wafali.
Okay. Okay. So the article says the person suffers from a mental disease or defect that destroys that person's capacity to appreciate the unlawfulness of nature of his or her conduct, or capacity to control his or her conduct to confer the requirements of law. So there is not only a matter of fact if there is a mental disorder or no, but the mental disorder has to accomplish certain characteristics in order to exonerate to the accused of the criminal responsibility, which in this case says that this mental disorder needs to make the accused to won't be able to distinguish whether if the action is good or bad. So that are the specific characteristics of this kind of mental illness, so the accused may be exonerated of the crimes. But once again, there is this agent think that there is no relevance discussing whether or not there is or no a mental ill of the accused, because the accused himself said that he was healthy, and even though he was not aware of his mental illness, there is no any kind of document, any kind of expertise, or any kind of study that shows and proves that the accused is already mentally ill in this kind of specifications. So that's basically why the attorney is not taking this article into consideration, because does not apply.
May I proceed with my objection? Hearsay. The agent is not aware of the documents that are in fact established, and as well as the fact that it's clinically shown that people who are suffering from a mental illness do not always disclose of their illness and of their effects, as well as the fact that it's known that in Libya, mental illness is a taboo subject, meaning that it's
important. I'm going to interrupt you. Please refrain from giving any opinions. Just say that the agent doesn't know what the documents that you're going to show are.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Agent Berlanga, for the objection. Justices, as you well know, it is your responsibility to accept or reject this objection on the grounds of hearsay. So those of you who vote yes, it should pass. Please do so with the yes reactions or no. With 2 votes in favor and 1 vote against, the objection of hearsay has passed. So justices take that into consideration when deciding the verdict and considering the evidence. Thank you, agents. And finally, yes, thank you. Justice Akane, you may ask your question.
Yeah, I have one last question. Is the accused justified in these actions because of what he was ordered in times of war?
No. If the accused was being ordered to do something, the Roman statute said that to this specific context to be applied to try to exonerate what the accused did, is that once, well, first the accused had must been threatened in some way to accomplish with that action, and specifically, but the principal specification that the Roman Statute gives is that there must be an accomplishment only what they ordered you to do. But first, this needs to be proved. I mean, what this attorney wants to say is that after trying to analyze whether or not the accused was threatened or was already obligated to do some kind of thing, there must be a proof who says that already was under not coaction but under the threat of the principal leader. But since there is no that proof, it's not up to debate. Well, the first in the witnesses, the accused said that he was following orders, and it could be taken into consideration, but the principal fact is that he did more than he was ordered to do, because in the evidence shown before, we could see that he not only executed to the person, to the 3 persons who we saw in the video, but he also shoot to their bodies more than once. So that is what this attorney taken into consideration to say that the accused did not only follow it instructions, trying to imagine that those instructions were coming from Khalifa Haftar, but also did more from initiative, and that's where the Roman Statute breaks the line, the margin, to says that may be exonerated from the guiltiness.
Thank you, Agent Valladares. Briefly before continuing, I yield the floor to your president.
Thank you, Vice President. Agent Valladares, I just want to remind you that since the objection presented by Agent Berlanga was accepted and was indeed passed, you shall not refer to any of the documents that the defense is to show, saying that they don't exist since you haven't seen them yet. So please don't mention that again. And having said that, I yield the word back to your Vice President.
Thank you, President. Just as an agent, just to make a quick announcement, as you may see in Section 5 of the Rules of Procedure, that was authorities of the court, if the chair wishes to directly participate in the debate through questions, the chair will do so through our repertoire. So having that in mind and seeing no further questions on the floor, I yield the floor to our repertoire.
Thank you very much, Vice President. The chair would like to ask, in the participation of the prosecution made such statements that made the court, or implied to the court, that the prosecution already knows what kind of mental illness the accused has. So does the prosecution know what kind of mental illness he has?
May the prosecution respond to that question?
Proceed.
Yeah. No, the prosecution already doesn't know what kind of mental ill. Actually, the prosecution and the court at this point, at this moment, and not taking into consideration the future of the debate, but at this point, we don't know what kind of mental illness does the accused have, because at this moment there is no document talking about it. So once we as court know if it is shown that the accused has mental illness, once we know what kind of mental illness is, then we as a court could debate the Article 31, whether if that mental ill is already up to exonerate to the person of their criminal acts or not, because the Rome Statute established some kind of specific characteristics to that mental ill to be like participating into that certain article.
Great. So just as a follow-up, is the agent saying that there is a mental illness, but we don't know specifically what?
Point of personal privilege.
Establish.
Could the justice repeat the question?
Yes, sorry. Is the agent saying that the court doesn't know what kind of mental illness he has, but he does have a mental illness? So he has a confirmed mental illness, we just don't know what it is.
No, what the agent said that is that if in the future in the debate, in the future in the court, from the defendant shows a proof that says that actually the accused is mentally ill, then we are going to start to debate whether or not that mentally ill in specific is up to the article or not. But at the moment, what it was shown and what it was said by the accused himself is that he said that he was not mentally ill. And if we as a court, we will need like a kind of document or like a expertise to decide whether or not there is a mental illness, and if there is a mental illness, start to debate what kind of mental illness is, so we can like try to decide as a court if there is up to the Article 31 or not.
All right, thank you very much. Justices, I yield the word to your Vice President.
Thank you, repertoire. Agents and justices, the time for questions has now come to an end. We will proceed with the hearing of the defense. However, agents of the defending agency, as we gave 5 minutes to the prosecution, we will be giving 5 minutes to you to get your affairs in order. So everyone present here, you may turn off your cameras for the next 5 minutes. Agency of the defense, 5 minutes to get ready. Thank you. Justices and agents, if you could begin turning your cameras back on, the chair would greatly appreciate it. We're just gonna wait 1 more minute for your president and repertoire that had to step out for a second. 1 second. Okay, thank you. Your repertoire will join us in a second. Agency of the Defense, are you ready for your hearing? Yes, okay. The chair would just like to remind you, you have 50 minutes to present your evidence and make your arguments. You have permission to share screen, and as happened with the prosecution hearing, please transfer between evidences as you please, and we will leave all questions to the end. You may begin.
Well, firstly, we would like to begin presenting and discussing evidence for Mr. Alverfali working under orders that were sent by superiors above him, not directly from him, such as the alleged Khalifa Haftar, who sent orders to him to execute war prisoners. It is also important to mention that in the first piece of evidence that the agents from the prosecuting team presented the image of Mr. Alverfali standing next to 5 war prisoners kneeling down, and he is holding a piece of paper in his hands that is clearly describing what orders he is supposed to execute, which shows and proves that he is not the one directing it, but is simply just following orders from superior generals, such as who could be suggested as Mr. Haftar. It is also important to take into account that all of these events happened in Libya and must follow the Libyan Penal Code. And as mentioned in Article 6, punishment must follow and be according to the Penal Code, and Article 26, which suggests that all actions must be taken into account as well as the circumstances they were done in, such as the nature and the kind of act, the degree of the criminal intent, the motives for offense, and the personal, familial, and social conditions of the offender. So as we've mentioned all of these things, we can move on to discussing the mental aspect of Mr. Alverfali, which we have proof of articles and documents as well as a witness to prove that he was definitely going through some mental issues in his life, as well as the proof of him executing prisoners, which shows us that no one in their right mind would just execute without asking or arguing against, unless submitted under threats and pressure, which, as Mr. Alverfali stated, he was very much under. So if my fellow agents could please present the documents for the mental illness. So here we have some links to sites where it is discussed and published that Mr. Alverfali was in fact suffering from mental disorder that was being treated up until the day he was shot a few weeks ago. So this mental disorder was being treated by psychologists, and if we could click one of the links showed on our document, please. The second link or the first one. So here, the title suggests that Oliver Foley had a partial mental disorder. So if we keep scrolling down the article, it is describing how he was in fact receiving treatment at a psychiatric hospital before he was assassinated last Thursday. So this is proof that he was in fact suffering from mental illnesses, regardless of what Mr. Arvel Foley said before, that he was not and had no memory of it. It is also important to take into account that worldwide mental illnesses are usually said to be a bad thing or something to be embarrassed about or something that defines people as weak or not, or that limits their capability of doing. So with that said, it is important to suggest that there might be reasons as to why Mr. Albert Foley said this before, when clearly there are sites, articles, and documents proving that he was in fact receiving treatment for this mental illness he was suffering from. If we could go back to the document to show the second link for this, please. So here, there's a statement made from a colonel in the military confirming that he possessed a power by removing himself from house arrest when he is mentally ill. So yet again, here is more proof suggesting that he is mentally ill. And well, with that proof shown, we can continue to discuss the mens rea and the religious aspect of his actions.
Thank you. So in this particular image, we can see how Mr. Mahmoud is holding his hands what it appears to be the Cree decision, which is from an article that we found, which says the arrest warrant describes that in one video, Albert Foley was holding a white document from which he reads, and that he describes as a decree decision. A decree decision is a formal and authoritative order, especially one having the force of law, a presidential decree. Law, a judicial decision or order. In theology, it's one of the eternal purposes of God, which events are foreordained. So we can explain this decree decision in both ways, being so that he was ordered to follow these decisions and these acts, as well as it could be a religious manner that he followed that he followed personally. Prior to the execution of 18 persons who were wearing orange jumpsuits and black hoods while kneeling barefooted on the ground with their hands tied behind their backs. This information tends to raise a possible defense of mistake of fact, a ground for excluding criminal responsibility under the Rome Statute if it negates the mens rea for the concerned crimes. Rome Statute, Article 32. Mens rea, can be described as, so mens rea by definition is the mental element of a person's intention to commit a crime or knowledge that one's action or lack of action could cause a crime to be committed. It is a necessary element of crimes. So with this being said, mens rea could be defined in this particular case as Mr. Mahmoud could have thought that the orders of executing these people were already taken into account, and the persecution of these people and the trial of these people were already done. Therefore, in his mind, he wasn't committing any sort of criminal act, and therefore he was just following orders.
Objection.
On what ground?
Speculation. Since the agent is not an expertise and does not what is specifically the mental illness of the accused, he cannot determine whether yes or not the accused was aware of what he was doing.
That's an order, Agent Valladares. Justices, those in favor of the objection passing, please vote yes. Those against, please vote no. With 2 votes in favor and 1 vote against, the objection has passed. So, defending agency, the objection was on the grounds of speculation of the mental illness. You may proceed with the hearing, just keep the objection.
Also, we would like to include another fact, that is the support that the All Psychiatric Brigade had on the Operation Dignity cause. Operation Dignity is the name of a company that supports war veterans in the USA, and it's a possible path of escape for Khalifa Haftar, as he has an American nationality, and he has a really close relationship to the service, and has been really compromised with it. Also, in this particular case, denial of fair trial can also be applied. The one that appears to be relevant is that it occurs when victims were never tried in any kind of judicial proceeding. It is the absence of a trial altogether that gives the rise to the charge of denial of fair trial. With this being said, we will also continue to explain and develop more the idea of the mental illness and the mental condition, as we believe it is really crucial to this case, and to have a better approach and better understanding of the case itself. So I will leave it to my fellow companion.
So as was mentioned by former agent Steed, she mentioned that mental health is considered a taboo subject across the world. So it is only expected that a general coming from such a traditional and such a close-minded environment, which is something that is clearly something to consider, considering that these events occurred in Libya. And according to Article 26 of the Libyan Penal Code, it is important to take the circumstances into account of the crime. So this includes the nature and the kind of act, whether it was ordered executions, the motives of offense, whether it had criminal intent, and its personal and familiar and social conditions of the offender. So as mentioned previously, it is vital to take into account the religion of Mr. Al-Rafali and how that played a role into his decisions, as well as the fact that his mental illness is, people who have mental illness are not always aware of their mental illnesses, which is something that we will prove later on with our witness. And it is also important to point out that no one wants to be seen as weak, especially not such a big military commander as is Mr. Al-Rafali. It is only expected that he would deny any sort of condition on his part. So adding on to the point of personal and familiar and social conditions of the offender, it is important to point out Mr. Al-Rafali's childhood and the environment that he grew up in. So Mr.
Berlanga, I'm very sorry to interrupt your hearing, but I have word that the chair would like to ask a quick question before proceeding, so I yield the floor to your repertoire.
Thank you very much, Vice President. Sorry for interrupting, agents, but the chair has a question regarding the sources that are being used in this hearing. So the chair would like to have clear what the sources are, or have a list of basically what the sources of these claims are.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was muted. Defending agency, please answer the question and then proceed with the hearing per usual.
Sorry, Chair, which points exactly is the chair referring to when it says that they're unsure of where the information is coming from?
Basically, well, not to say every single thing is wrong, is that the chair is not really clear on what the source of all of these claims are. So if the agent can say what the source of the evidence is before they present the evidence, so that the chair can have a clear view of what the sources are, it would be better for the agents and the justices. So thank you. The Vice President can continue with the flow of the debate.
Thank you, Repertoire. Defending agency, you have the floor once again.
So as was being mentioned, it is important to take into account that in Article 26 of the Libyan Penal Code, which is a document, an official document, it states that it's important to take the circumstances into account. So I'm retaking the point that was being mentioned earlier. So the nature and the kind of act, so whether it was an order execution, would enable the trial it would enable the defendant to have a shorter sentence, as well as the motive of offense, whether or not Mr. Al-Wafali had criminal intent in his actions, which clearly he did not, considering he mentioned in the initial part of the debate that he was merely following orders, and he had Libya's best interest in mind and was doing what he thought was correct for his country. Additionally, the personal and familiar and social conditions of the offender. So we would like to talk a little bit about the Warfala tribe, which is the tribe that Mr. Al-Wafali grew up in. So this tribe was loyal to and followed the instructions of the dictator of that time, which was Gaddafi. And so as is known universally, Gaddafi was later assassinated by, in fact, Mr. Haftar and his brigade and his commanders and his workers. So it is important to know that at this time, Al-Wafali was working for Haftar. So this shows that even though Mr. Al-Wafali grew up in a tribe that was loyal and worshipped the dictator Gaddafi, he later took part in the assassination of the dictator and of the eradication and of the rebellion against that government. So it just shows the influence that Mr. Haftar had on his actions, and whether he completely shifted his entire stance and moral stance. And it's known that Mr. Al-Wafali was loyal to Mr. Gaddafi, but then later rebelled against him when he joined Mr. Haftar. So this clearly goes to show that Haftar had such a big influence upon Mr. Al-Wafali, which could in fact be a very important factor in proving that Mr. Haftar was in fact a very potent figure in enabling Mr. Al-Wafali to commit all these alleged crimes.
It is also important to mention that Mr. Haftar, who is the alleged commander of all of the executions that have been taken place, is not being trialed for any of this because he allegedly cooperated with the government and handed in Mr. Al-Wafali instead. So if we're really seeking justice here, the real issue should be that the man that should also be convicted is Mr. Khalifa Haftar, regardless of his so-called efforts to help the government.
On what grounds?
Irrelevance, Mr. Whether not just taking into consideration that this court only talks about the first accused, that is Mahmoud Mustafa Al-Wafali, but also because Khalifa Haftar already faced a court. So it's irrelevant to take that into consideration now.
Thank you, Agent Valladares. Justices, once again, Agent Maedada's objection on the grounds of irrelevance. Please vote yes or no if it should pass. Okay, the objection has unanimously passed, so the argument will be dismissed. Please proceed, Agent Suicide.
On the other hand, it is also important to mention, as mentioned before by my agents as well, that Mr. Haftar, who commanded all these operations, show that Mr. Al-Verfali was simply carrying them out. Therefore, the charges imposed on him, even though he was the one, clearly as shown in the evidence by the opposing agency, show that he was simply following the orders due to, as Mr. Al-Verfali mentioned himself, was put under extreme pressure and threats and fear under very big war times that had impacts on his life. So another thing is that if the chair wants us to upload all of our sources into the chat for them to have a read through them, we can do that if that's necessary.
Thank you, Agent Steed. The chair greatly appreciates that, and if possible, yes, please upload the sources. Thank you so much. Agency of the defense, has the hearing concluded, or do we still have time?
Point of inquiry.
Established.
Does the chair suggest that the defense includes the witness at this time, or should we wait for another moment?
Yes, all the witnesses should be present during the hearing. So if possible, please let the witness know that it would be now the best time to join the Zoom.
Point of inquiry once again. Excuse me, Chair. May we have a few minutes to arrange the process with the witness?
Yes, of course. The chair will give you, it's currently 11:30. Will 5 minutes suffice? Perfect. Okay, so once again, just an agent, you can turn off your cameras, 11:35. We can meet back here. And if anyone has any questions for the chair, don't hesitate to ask. Justices and agents, if we could start coming back, please. Okay, agency of the defense, one question. Does your witness go by the name of, or are they going to be entering with the name Rita Casero? Is that
Yes.
them?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll admit them. Okay, they've been admitted. Just as a quick refresher for all agents and justices, the process of the witness is the agency that brought the witness, in this case the defense, will get to ask their questions, and then there will be opportunity for cross-examination by the prosecution. And finally, justices and the chair, if necessary, will be able to ask their questions to the witness. So, okay, I believe we can begin. Ready whenever the defending agent and the witness are. You have the floor.
Judges and prosecution. So in the court today, we have the psychiatric hospital worker who is in charge of treating Mr. Al-Rafali, and she's going to speak a bit about his condition and how that might affect him, and whether or not Mr. Al-Rafali is aware of this condition and how that might affect what he says and what he does.
Well, so basically, Mr. Al-Farali has PTSD, and this affects his ability to make rational decisions. He was under medication and was submitted to a psychiatrist hospital. And this basically means that he was very affected by everything that was going on around him, and obviously affects his rational decision making. And he was not in the right state of mind to make decisions, and this puts him and others around him under threats and events because of the events that he has gone through.
Thank you for the introduction. Agency of the defense, please proceed with the specific questions.
So a question for the witness would be, why in the pre-trial, I'm sorry, in the earlier trial, Mr. Mustafa mentioned that he does not actually have any mental illness, and he denied the claims to having a mental illness. Is this common amongst patients with treatment in psychiatric wards? And have you seen this before? And does that mean that he does in fact not have a mental illness? Is it justified? Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Well, yes, it is very common among patients to deny that they have any type of disorder because they don't want to believe that they have this certain disorder, because it's not seen by society as something normal, and it makes it seem like they're a threat to society. So most patients do deny this, and they don't really accept that they might have a problem like our patient.
Is there anything stating that patients are probably unaware themselves that they have mental illnesses in their lives?
Well, a lot of the time, patients can't even identify themselves as for who they are, and is a lot, like it's very reasonable and very common for them to deny it. And this is very like common across like the whole world. And basically, this is like known as agnosia, and it's a mental illness that someone is unaware of their own mental health condition, or that they can't like perceive their health condition accurately. And it's a very common symptom of certain mental illnesses. And perhaps it's the most difficult to understand for those who have never experienced it, but yes, it is very common.
Will you say, what will you say that this condition will have in a person's personal environment and social life? Will it change its behavior in a way, and in which way?
Well, this would certainly change a person's behavior, and it would affect them a lot, since PTSD creates ongoing fear. And obviously, as I mentioned before, it creates like irrational decision making, and people have trouble with this. So it affects their social life and can lead to other mental illnesses, such as like depression, which can cause patients to like distance themselves, and other more serious mental illnesses. So it does affect their lives and people around them.
Would you say that PTSD is responsible for and plays a role in the defendant's life, as in its actions, like whether it's creating something violent, creating something impulsive, or maybe something that would cloud his judgment at the orders that he is being given by his superiors?
Well, yes, it would definitely affect him, and it would put him under threat, and it would make him a lot more of an impulsive person, and as it affects his neurotransmitters and on like a neurological level. So this means that basically his whole brain is affected, and because of all of this, he can make like impulsive decisions very easily, and he can put others under threat without even like realizing it, or it can make him not able to know whether the orders he is given are good or not, because it's an environment that he is so used to it. So it like affects his judgment, and therefore like this treatment is needed due to like his traumatic experiences that he has been submitted under.
With this being said, would you say that a person that suffers from PTSD will not be totally capable of doing right decisions and moral decisions in a way that other people who do not suffer these conditions will?
Definitely. Well, since, as I stated before, since this affects decision making and it affects their judgment, it makes them blinded to what could be correct or what could be wrong. And this like obviously affects their rationality, and therefore they do not have the same way of thinking as other normal people would. And this is why it might be very hard for others to understand, but these are like symptoms and causes, things that PTSD causes.
No further questions.
Thank you, Agency of Defense. Everyone in the court, we will now proceed with the cross-examination. Agent Valladares, you have the floor to ask the witness any questions.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you for being here. My first question will be exactly what was the diagnostic that the accused has? What is exactly the mental illness that he was suffering from?
It was diagnosed that he has PTSD, and this is post-traumatic stress disorder, which means that he was affected by events, traumatized by previous events in his life.
Okay. 1 minute, please. Yeah. Point of personal privilege.
Establish.
May the agent make a brief preamble?
Yes, considering this is a cross-examination, it is not necessary to make a motion for the brief preamble, but please be brief.
Thank you. This kind of mental transfer that is the PTSD says that it affects the way of thinking of the people because of the fear and because of the way that they react to violent situations. So would like to ask, a person with PTSD is aware or unaware of their actions?
A person with PTSD would be unaware of their actions, as their judgment is very affected in this process.
Okay, so basically, a person with PTSD is not able to distinguish what they are actually doing.
Well, they can't distinguish whether what they are doing is good or bad like a normal person would. So they're unable to know if it's correct, and they don't have normal rationality when it comes to life and to decisions and everything that goes on in their life.
Okay, another question. You said that the accused was actually suffering for something called agnosia, but 1 moment. Wait, yeah. But the agnosia says that it is caused by an infarct, an abscess, a traumatism. So maybe it will be like a kind of the Alzheimer illness and Parkinson illness. So what was the reason why the accused was diagnosed by agnosia?
Well, I can't necessarily disclose that information because of confidentiality, but it mostly comes from trauma and from PTSD, from what I mentioned before.
Thank you. Another question. They mentioned that he was already under treatment. Is there any kind of medication that he was taking actually?
As I said before, I can't be disclosing this information as it is personal to our client.
Yeah, I would like to remember to the expertise that and to the witness that this is occurred, and it is necessary to determine whether or not he was under medication, because we as a court need to examine what kind of effects has that medication and what were the time then he was already consuming the medication. So would like to encourage to the witness to answer the question, so the court can already establish if this mental situation is applying to the specific context of the crimes committed.
Objection.
On what grounds?
Competence.
Okay, elaborate, please.
The agent has no responsibility in stating what can and cannot be said by the witness, seeing as there is such a thing as doctor and patient confidentiality, which establishes that a psychiatric health worker is to disclose only what that worker is allowed to disclose legally.
Thank you, Agent. We're going to skip that objection. Since it is important for the court to have all of the information, Agent Valladares, please refrain from telling the psychiatric worker how to do her job. But if this can provide as much information to the court that will be beneficial not only to the court, but also to the agency client. Thank you. You may continue.
So the agent may reestablish the question.
Established.
So the accused Mahmoud Mustafa was under medication with the treatment.
Well, as said before, this is patient's confidentiality, and doctors by law cannot be speaking about this without permission.
So we know that the accused was already suffering PTSD, but the psychiatric health worker, it's not willing to tell if the accused was medicated. So when another question. So when the treatment started?
Sorry, could you repeat your question?
Yeah. When was the time when the treatment against the PTSD started?
Sorry, give me just a moment.
Yeah.
Well, it started once he was arrested.
Okay, so it was after the crimes being committed. Another question. When he was diagnosticated or PTSD?
Objection, relevance.
That's in order.
Please explain, agent.
This agency does not understand why the agent would like to know when exactly he was diagnosed, as it does not play any role into whether or not he had the condition or not, like before he was diagnosed, because it's known that people have the condition whether or not you're diagnosed, and the moment that you're diagnosed doesn't determine the moment when you have that condition.
Thank you, agent. I'm gonna rule that dilatory again. I understand your point, but I don't think that it is relevant to the case. So if the psychiatric health worker could respond that would be great. Thank you.
So could you respond when was the time when the accused was diagnosticated with PTSD?
He was diagnosed once he was arrested.
Okay, thank you. So I have another question. Could you know exactly what is the reason of the PTSD? Because since he was diagnosticated of PTSD after the arrest, that would you say that this PTSD is caused by the arrest or by why or what he was lived in the past?
No, it was definitely caused by what he had lived in the past, because PTSD is caused by trauma, not by the arrest. So it was caused by all the murder and trauma that he had lived in the past.
Okay. This PTSD affected the wait, one moment. Let me rephrase that. One moment. Yeah. Would like to make aware to the witness that it is really important to determine whether or not this kind of mental illness is destroy the capacity of the person of whether distinguish if an action is good or bad. So how many times, once again, and would like to this time the witness answer the question, Was the accused under medication?
He was being put under treatment. However, he rejected his treatment because of religion. That's as much information as I can disclose.
So the religion and his religion didn't wanted to accept the treatment. Okay, so whether, let me rephrase that. One moment, please. So he was not under treatment, medication.
He was under medical treatment, but not medicated.
Okay, and during the process of the treatment and the medical treatment, did he shown any? Sorry?
Thank you. Very sorry to interrupt, but the time for the prosecution's questions has now ended. Justices, we now have, I believe, 2 minutes left in this session. If you have any questions, please be brief. However, you do have a chance, okay? Justice Kimberly Prost, please state your question.
Thank you. So witness, into what type of exactly procedure did he go, or medical exam did he go through to reach his diagnostics?
Well, he got psychological examinations and he was under official examinations of our our hospitals. And
thank you for your question, Justice. Justice Akane, please ask your question.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to know if you know what type of PTSD does Mr. Mustafa suffer from, because I think that information is vital to this since it levels in response and everything.
okay, give me just a moment. Well, as verified, there are it's the PTSD type that he has is known as acute stress disorder, and it lasted long enough to become post-traumatic stress disorder.
Thank you, Justice Akane. Justice Kimberly Prost.
I'm gonna repeat my question because it was not answered before. It was not clear for me. Into what type of diagnosis he passed? I mean, an MRI, a CT, or PET? This is my question.
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
Yeah, it's the same question. The first one that I did is about what type of procedures. It was not answered for me. It was an MRI, a CT, a PET, RID. I don't know. Could you respond that for me?
So you were asking like what type of symptoms the patient had and how it was diagnosed?
More what type of medical exams, I mean, he passed through.
Well, basically when a patient has PTSD, it can just be, it can literally happen to anyone, especially people who are experience intense or threatening life events. And this was analyzed behavior and taking into consideration everything that he had been through in his life. After analyzing this behavior, psychiatrists can tell when people have PTSD, and especially because it starts to become quite obvious because of the memories that are described by these people, avoidance or like negative changes that people have in their moods or in the way that they think. And this can be seen through those symptoms, and those were the tests that led us to know that our patient had PTSD.
Thank you, and thank you, Justice, for your question. Justices and agents, we only have time for 2 more questions. So Justice Chang Ho, please ask away.
Thank you. So you said that PTSD is only caused by trauma. Would you say that being violently arrested and betrayed by your friends and troops can cause trauma?
Yes, it can definitely cause trauma, and but the patient, the trauma basically had already come from before, and this just extended the trauma and made it worse for them.
Thank you, and thank you, Justice, for your question. And to finish off, Justice Akane, please ask.
Thank you, Chair. My last question would be, I understand that you cannot tell us certain things, but if he was not on medication, what type of treatment was he receiving? Is that psychotherapy or what?
Yes, the patient was receiving therapy and psychotherapy.
Okay, thank you, justices and agents. With this, we conclude the hearing of the defense. So I will pass the word to your repertoire to officially close the session, but please stay 1 more minute for a quick announcement.
All right, thank you very much. So now that quorum has been set, I declare this session closed. Now the Vice President will give some announcements, so please stay here.
Thank you, repertoire. So everyone, very good work today. And the chair would just like to remind you that the next session is a bit longer than the sessions we've been having, and it is more, there's going to be more work. Next session, we have closing statements, and we were supposed to have questions for the defense at the end of the session, but seeing as we had the witness, Mahmoud Mustafa, come testify before the court, this schedule was prolonged. So next session, we would like to ask you that instead of joining at 2 p.m., you join at 1:50 so we can begin with the questions before. We will have these questions, and then as the schedule states, proceed to closing statements, questions, judges' room, where the judges will discuss the prayer for relief of both a memorial and counter memorial. And finally, at the end of that session, we will have the pre-trial for our case B, Ali Kushaib. So in this break, have lunch, take a break, but also get your affairs in order for next session because there's a lot of work to be done. But good job, everyone. So if you want, you may leave the Zoom.
Yeah, if just Kevin Mancilla and Agent Valladares would stay, that would be great. But other than that, we'll see you the next session.
Hi, Chair.
Hola.
Hola.
Oigan, nada más queremos ver qué va a pasar aquí, porque la verdad es que el primer tema ya se acabó, o sea, ya está a punto de acabar. Y ya la parte grande que queda es de los jueces. Y como tenemos poquitos jueces, estamos diciendo que si ya te quedas solito este primer tema que lo estás haciendo bastante bien, y ya para el segundo, que también empieza hoy el pre-trial, ya eres agencia con Kevin.
Bueno, si la mesa lo recomienda. Kevin, ¿qué dices? ¿Kevin pasaría a ser juez?
Kevin sería juez ahorita. Ya lo habíamos medio platicado y creo que no está tan difícil porque nada, platicar. Y el siguiente tema empieza hoy, después del break. Ahorita ya solo te queda un discurso, tu closing statement, y te vamos a mandar a un breakout room con Elisa y conmigo, con la vicepresidenta, en lo que se quedan los jueces decidiendo si lo encarcelan o no, y cuánto tiempo, y todo eso. Y entonces, Kevin se quedaría ahí nada más como platicando el que opina, y ya para el segundo tema ya son agentes juntos.
Exacto.
Ok,
Va.
sí, va.
Entonces,
Sí.
sí,
Ok, empieza a
¿quién pregunta de algo?
La parte del